All right, we're looking at Nigeria's shrinking tax collection. Nigeria has one of the lowest tax ratios globally. Its tax to GDP measure currently stands at 6.1%. That's about the lowest or poorest in Africa, as a matter of fact.
Indeed.
But the federal government says it is targeting an increase to 18% by 2020.
Is that a tall target? Lagos State, a model state with more than 20 million people, have found massive infrastructure project with tax revenues. The state has an improved tax collection system, and the federal government seeks to replicate this. A reason why the man who had headed the Lagos Revenue Office, Babatunde Fowler, was moved by President Muhammadu Buhari to the helm of the Federal Inland Revenue Services in 2015.
All right, at this point, let's bring in our guest, Eben Joels. He's a founding partner at Transact. Thanks for joining us via Skype from the United States. Good morning. Good to have you on the show.
Good morning.
Now, out of the projected tax revenue of how much now? 5 trillion naira in 2016. Nigeria was only able to rake in some 1.2 trillion in that year, rendering the 2016 budget totally almost a failure. To use kinder words.
In terms of IGR,
that's a shortfall of 3.8 trillion naira. Now, what are the projections for 2017 if Nigeria cannot get this 10 million people into the tax net and all of that?
Well, if I should come in.
Yeah.
Please do.
Don't forget that figure is the lowest that we have collected in the last 5 years. Sometime in 2013, we actually collected over 5 trillion naira from taxes. So from 5 trillion, it's been falling from 2013 to 2016, from 5 trillion to a little 3 trillion to 1.2 that you're talking about now.
Yeah.
And the reasons are not far-fetched. Tax is a percentage of something. That tells you how much national productivity has fallen. And that tells you how much the profitability of companies doing business who pay most of these taxes, their productivity have fallen in the last 18 months. So it's a natural consequence. And if the economy doesn't pick up significantly, there is no magic you can do to force the taxes to rise back to 2013 levels immediately.
Speaking of which, Nigeria plans to rake in some 3 or so trillion this year. Now, can we even talk about getting more people into the tax net? 10 million or so is what government is projecting without actually increasing employment.
Yes, there are two things. Don't forget that we are a federal system. And so taxes are collected based on the type of person. That is, if you're a corporate individual, if you're a company, a limited liability company, a PLC, you pay your taxes to the federal government on your income. If you're an individual like me and yourself, you pay your taxes to the state in which you are resident. Now, if government is planning to add 10 million and we're talking about federal government, I want to believe that we are talking about adding 10 million companies, because the federal government does not collect taxes from individuals apart from people who are living in Abuja and members of the armed forces. And now the question is, there needs to be a whole lot of synergy between the FIRS and perhaps, if you say maybe the EFCC, because companies are the vehicles that are used to perpetrate most of the fraud that we see around. And if the two agencies, if you want to get more companies into the tax net, there are so many companies that you hear about that, with massive amounts in their bank accounts, and they don't file returns with the FIRS. So it is important that if the FIRS is actually going to get more companies into its tax net, then they have to start talking to all the other agencies that deals with companies, which
will
include.
Let's quickly look at Ibn Jewels. Let me interrupt you and just chip in this question before we continue with our slides. Look at the issue of tax collectors, that's the officials themselves, in terms of compromise and corruption. The EFCC might come in, but if the officials decide to shortchange the government, they still can. And that issue of the fact that they are not well remunerated, is that a problem?
You know, I'll be honest with you. You know, I have dealt a lot with tax officials in Nigeria. I have also dealt a lot with other government agencies, and I can tell you that in my experience, the civil servants in the Nigerian tax authorities are not, they are a shade better off than you get in some other agencies. If you don't mind, I'll give you an example. It was not the FIRS, for example, that was giving out incentives to petroleum companies. That was giving out incentives that were meant for non-petroleum companies to, you know, to petroleum companies. It wasn't the FIRS that was doing that. It was another agency. So I'm just trying to tell you, the FIRS has been, in the last 10, 15 years, has been getting more professionalized, and I think there's some corruption in there, but it's not, you can't compare the FIRS
to the Nigerian police. It's not as bad as it used to be.
You can't, all right, Ibn Jewels, to the Nigerian police, for example.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on TVC Breakfast this morning. Ibn Jewels is a founding partners Transact. Of course, out of the 1.2 trillion tax revenue, 482 billion naira goes to tax consultants. That's what we'll have to leave it this morning.
You took that out of me, and I'm so happy you brought that yes, up. Really, we're not getting more, and we are paying people to do the job. And how far are they doing the job, really?